I'm your intrepid host, L.A. Marzulli. This is a very special edition concerning what is going on over in the Middle East. We'll get into that and so much more. But first, a word from our trusted sponsor. Excess belly fat has been deemed the most dangerous fat of them all, as it's linked to so many health issues. The reason being, excess belly fat grows deep in the abdominal cavity and puts pressure on some of the body's most vital organs. That's one of the reasons why myself, along with so many people, are beginning to turn to this amazing new substance, which is thoughtfully formulated with science-backed ingredients that promote reduced fat storage, help to speed up the breakdown of fat, support weight management, reduce cravings, and boost metabolism. Folks, the best part I love is that you can get 51% off for the rest of the month, or until they sell out, whichever comes first. Get yours now by going to trimwithla.com. Once again, that's trimwithla.com. Trimwithla.com. I'm going to give this 30 days. I'll report back to you, and we'll see what it does. Coming to you from an undisclosed location somewhere deep in the heart of the Santa Monica Mountains, I am your intrepid host, L.A. Marzulli. This is a very special edition of our show. This is something that I wrote for Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural Report. That's our monthly news magazine. Got some great stories, great commentaries by people like Mando Gonzalez, Sonda Allison, who's also our editor of the magazine. She does a great job. Vicki Joy Anderson, Fritz Zimmerman, Doug Woodward. So a lot of great folks there, and you can check that out by going to lamarzulli.net. So, what the future may hold prophetically. This is something that I wrote for a news magazine. As most of you know, by now our trip for Israel was canceled at the last minute. Here's a brief overview. Peggy and I were at the Prophecy Conference in Oklahoma, where I spoke twice on Friday. We were set to leave the conference on Saturday morning and head to the airport and then over to Atlanta. We were going to bivouac there until Sunday afternoon. From there, we would have taken the late afternoon flight over to Israel. So Saturday morning around 6:30, my phone is blowing up, and Bob Ulrich of Prophecy Watchers is on the phone telling me that Israel has just declared war. Let me stop right there. I want to get into that and just let you guys know something. Make a mark there. If Netanyahu had not declared war, more than likely we would have flown over. But the fact that Israel was already at that point at a war footing, I just wasn't going to travel to a war zone, and also I wasn't going to bring 50 people with me. It just didn't make any sense. So we pulled the plug, as many of you know, at 8 o'clock that morning, and then by 1 o'clock, because the High Holy Day was over, that's when Aaron pulled the plug on it as well, Lifkin Tours. Needless to say, I was alarmed and immediately got on the net. Sure enough, Netanyahu had declared war on Hamas. We know why. We now know why, as the unjustified slaughter of innocent Israelis happened, and 1,400 people were butchered and murdered in the most heinous of ways. Let me just weigh in on that real quick. What amazes me is that depending on where you go and who you listen to, this is somehow just moved to the side. We don't talk about that. I just want to make something really clear to all you conspiracy theorists out there. If you have a paraglider coming in like this, so all your stuff is down here, right? All your cameras and motion detectors, everything's down here. You're expecting the attack to come through the fence line, but it doesn't. It comes through the air, through the paragliders, who are being launched on the beach because of the offshore breeze coming from the Mediterranean. And the paragliders go up, they're let off, and next thing you know, they're behind where the fences are, carrying out their heinous act. What amazes me is how already most people have forgotten about this, that Israel was celebrating the High Holy Day, and 1,400 people lie dead, massacred, slaughtered. So somehow, it's just amazing how a lot of people are sidestepping that, overlooking that. That's how we got where we are. Let's make no mistake about that. 1,400 people were butchered and murdered in the most heinous of ways. Peggy and I prayed about what we should do regarding the tour, and by 8 a.m., we have pulled the plug on the tour. So you guys know that. Here's something interesting. The sites of Gilgal Raphaim, the Cave of Pan, Nimrod's Fortress, the Throne of Baal, and even Tel Gezer. Not so much Tel Gezer because that's not in the north northern part of Israel. But those other sites certainly are. And where those other sites are located, we can't go there. So essentially there is no tour anyway. So we did the right thing by pulling it apart. Also, the Temple Mount is shut down, and we go under. In our tour, we like to go underneath the Temple Mount because that's where these two huge stones are. And those stones, in my opinion, are megalithic. They are from the original builders. The Romans used those, put them in their wall of the Fortress Antonia. But in my opinion, those stones are much, much older than the Temple Mount itself. I think the original builders of that site were Nephilim. It's Nephilim architecture, fallen angel technology. When we go on the tour and we're underneath the Temple Mount, that stone is huge. It's like 40 feet long. It is unbelievable. And when you stand there just looking at it, it's mind-boggling. Now, true, there are Herodian markings on the edge of the stone, on the base of a stone, around the stone, but those could have been done afterwards. We know this for a fact that in a lot of cultures, certainly Egypt is a perfect example, they'll go in and they'll repurpose objects which they had nothing to do with. We also know here in the Americas that Native Americans went into, I'm just kind of going down some rabbit trails here, so bear with me, but they would go into these ancient mounds and they would use them to bury their dead. This is why on the top of the mound, you find Native American skeletons down 3, 4, 5, 6 feet, whatever. But they did not build the mounds, in my opinion. But I digress. So the prophecies that we might be looking at, I'm just going to kind of wing this a little bit, but we know a couple of things here. Number one, that Israel has threatened to destroy Damascus if Iran pulls the trigger on Hezbollah attacking from the north. Now, Hezbollah has got, first of all, they are Iranians' proxy, number one. Number two, they've got upwards of easily 200,000 missiles. Israel cannot stop all of them, as I said last week. So Isaiah 17, this ancient prophecy, talks about Damascus being destroyed. Do I want that to happen? Of course not. Who would? Who in their right mind wants Damascus destroyed? Or any city destroyed for that matter? But what was written will come to pass. What was foretold is unfolding. That's an ancient prophecy written thousands of years ago. And yet we see this, on the 6 o'clock news, this exchange, this vitriol being exchanged here. So the Iranians at the moment are sort of standing down, but everything can escalate. Meanwhile, the war in Gaza continues. Gaza has now been split into the northern part of Gaza and the southern part. The southern part is where most of the civilians are. Isn't it interesting how Egypt will not take any of them? How Saudi Arabia will not take any of the so-called Palestinians? How Jordan doesn't want any of them? Well, these are your Arab brothers. What's wrong with you? But here in the United States, you've got people saying, oh, let's bring them over here. What you're importing, not all of the people there. It's not what I'm saying. There are great people everywhere. But when you have someone that's tied in to the ideology that we see in Hamas, that's capable of murdering women and children and decapitating infants, I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. I'm not making this stuff up. It's not fake news. It's not the stuff of conspiracy theory. It's documented. Look at the videos. This is why we are where we are. Hopefully things will not escalate. Let me continue. If you attend a church that holds to an amillennial perspective, you won't hear anything about this, about the prophecies that I just mentioned. Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, Ezekiel 38. And we've already touched base on some of those last week, but those were written in the guidebook of the supernatural thousands of years ago. Bill Salas has been doing and writing books and talking about this and warning of the Psalm 83 war literally for a couple of decades here. It's absolutely incredible. But if you come or you're sitting in a church that has an amillennial perspective, you won't hear anything about this because in their view, the church is Israel. Nothing could be further from the truth, in my opinion. The church and Israel are two separate entities. No, the church is not Israel and never will be. Most likely, we will never hear a peep about end times prophecies as these well intentioned folks insist that the church will usher in the kingdom and hand it over to Jesus. Let me ask you this: are we better now than when we were 20 years ago? I think most of you agree that we are not, and that we are headed for some very dark times. In fact, with the war in Israel, one can make a very cogent case that we might be headed towards World War III. God, I hope not. I really hope we're not going there. I hope that somehow this thing is diffused. And yet, it's not up to me. It's not up to you. The powers that be, what is going on, the vitriol against Israel, at the moment, I've never seen it higher. It's alarming. It's absolutely alarming. So we'll see where it goes. Turkey might be the wild card. Recently, Turkish President Erdogan stated that Israel was at fault. He held a rally where over 1 million Turks got together in support of the so-called Palestinians. First of all, there is no such ethnic group as the Palestinians. This has been proven. There are no cultural differences. There is no different language. They speak Arabic like every other Arab. There are no separate customs for the Palestinians. They are part of the Arab states which surround it. And I'll say this again, and this is not fake news. It's not conspiracy theorists. The king of Jordan stated on the record, we don't want the Palestinians. Egypt closed off the borders. No Palestinians here. Saudi Arabia won't take them. In fact, someone sent me a clip of an emir going off. It was unbelievable that this guy would say some of the things that he said. I won't show that because I can't vet that tape, and I do not speak Arabic. But if what this man was saying is true, his vitriol as a fellow Arab against the Palestinians, I found incredibly alarming. So I'll just leave it at that. So the Turks lost World War I. And so the 400-year-old Ottoman Empire was dismantled. This is a matter of historical record. I'm not making this stuff up. This is not, once again, L.A. Marzulli's thoughts on it. I'm weighing in on it. But the Ottoman Empire held sway over a larger part of what today is the Middle East, including all of North Africa, including modern-day Egypt. The Ottoman Empire controlled this area. At the end of World War I, and I've stated it before, but I've got to say it again, the modern states of Iraq, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine were created out of thin air. So when the Brits and the French came into the area after World War I, the Turks had lost. And so the penalty for the Turks siding with Germany at the close of World War I was to divide up what was the Ottoman Empire, which had been in control of the region for about 400 years. They controlled all of the Middle East that you see now into all of North Africa, including modern-day Egypt, all across the top of North Africa. The Ottoman Turks controlled. Essentially, they held sway for 400 years, undisputed. So the Brits and the French come in, they carve up the land, and they create the modern-day states of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. Now, Palestine was named by the Romans. It was Israel. The Temple Mount remains there. There has always been a Jewish presence throughout the land for the last 2,000 years, all throughout the Middle East, all throughout Palestine. And remember, in the late 19th century, this is when the Jews began to come back into the land. This is where it starts to happen. And remember the prophecy in our Bibles that tells us, I will regather you from the four corners of the earth. I will gather you from the four corners of the earth and reestablish you in your ancient homeland, never to be removed again. So I find that absolutely interesting that it's there. And these modern states are carved up. The tension comes from Israel declaring independence in 1948. And this is where the Arab states, it's a multifaceted attack, but they lose. And Israel expands her borders and then gives land for peace, the two-state solution. She gives up Gaza. And we show this in our Watchers series with Dan Gordon. I believe it's in Watchers 10, where as Israel is leaving the Gaza Strip, the mortar fire is chasing them already. Already they're starting. This has been going on forever. So it's a question of they give the land, but there is no peace. And that's a matter of documentation. I mean, it's there in the record. So, back to Turkey. Everyone is looking at what he most likely still believes in his twisted mind, that these countries should be part of a Turkish empire, with him as the caliph, him as the head. So that's what we're really looking at here. There's a book in my library called 1,000 Years for Revenge. And in that book, it talks about that in that section of the world, people remember things. That's why the title is 1,000 Years for Revenge. What are we looking at? What are we really looking at in the Middle East? Because if Turkey joins the fray, Turkey has a well-oiled machine for warfare. They've got a standing army, they've got an air force, whereas Hezbollah has no air force. The Iranians have an air force, but are the pilots equipped to fly against the Israelis? The Turks might be. So we can see that this whole thing right now, it's in check on some level. But Yemen has declared war against Israel. Make no mistake about it, Iran is funding a lot of what we see. Certainly Hezbollah in southern Lebanon is Iran's proxy. So anything is possible. And this is why it leads to Ezekiel 38, where we see a group of nations coming up against a land of unwalled villages. I read this last week. I don't think I need to reiterate it, but Magog, according to the first century historian Josephus, is the Scythians. That's who this is. I find that interesting. Those are the Stans, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and all they need to do is go through Iran. And the Iranians will let them go through. They've already talked about joining the fray. Rosh is the remote north of Russia. Meshech or Tubal definitely is Turkey. Persia, of course, is the land of Iran. Kush, Ethiopia. Put, also translated Libya. Gomer, parts of Turkey. Beth Togarma is also part of Turkey. Isn't it interesting that that Kush, Ethiopia, and that whole area, right now it's sort of dormant. It's not really doing anything. But it is listed in the Ezekiel 38 war. Folks, I don't wish this on anybody. I don't wish this type of vitriol that we're seeing. We see a lot of unrest. We see demonstrations all throughout the United States, certainly in D.C., upwards of 300,000 people were demonstrating there, pro-Palestinian. And, you know, they didn't start, the Israelis did not start this. And somehow that's continually overlooked. They didn't start this. Hamas started this. 1,400, I'll say it again, 1,400 civilians, for the most part, were just mercilessly slaughtered in the most heinous of ways. Anyway, that's our Middle East update. I really hope I don't have to do this every week. I hope this thing comes to a conclusion and quickly. I hope that cool heads prevail. However, what was written will come to pass. What was foretold is unfolding. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow with another episode of On the Trail of the